Earth is not a testing ground. It is not a preparatory stage for something better. This is not a playground, and it is certainly not a paradise. What we are living in, every single day, is a nightmare masquerading as life. Wars, pandemics, poverty, cruelty, and endless pain, they aren't random occurrences or challenges designed to make us stronger. They are the defining characteristics of this realm. Welcome to hell, and if that makes you uncomfortable, good. Because the truth isn't meant to be comforting, it's meant to wake you up. Let's strip away the sanitized narratives you've been fed for centuries. Many ancient traditions, especially those outside the mainstream Abrahamic faiths, tell us that this world wasn't created by a benevolent God, but by a tyrannical force. The Gnostics called this entity the demiurge, a false god obsessed with power and control. According to their texts, the demiurge trapped divine souls in material bodies, forcing them to endure suffering and servitude in a corrupt, broken world. And yet, most people blindly worship this construct, mistaking it for the true source of divinity. It's the ultimate con, turning slaves into willing participants in their own torment. Now, let's talk about pain. Not the necessary suffering that builds character, that's just another lie to keep you docile. I'm talking about the kind of pain that defines existence, the grinding misery of poverty, the despair of losing loved ones, the horrors of war. Did you know that more than 100 million people have been killed in wars just in the past century? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We have systems of oppression that exploit billions, diseases that ravage entire populations, and an endless cycle of natural disasters wiping out lives in seconds. Ask yourself, does this sound like the design of a benevolent creator? Or does it sound like a prison designed to maximize suffering? You want more proof? Let's talk about the concept of time. Time is not your friend. It is the most relentless tormentor of all. From the moment you are born, you are on a clock. Every second, every minute brings you closer to death. And along the way, time ensures that you watch everything you love decay and fade. It robs you of youth, health, and even hope. Time doesn't heal, it corrodes. If there's any greater weapon in the arsenal of this so-called world, I'd like to hear it. And yet, people still cling to the idea that this world is a gift, that suffering is redemptive, that life's miseries are tests to make us better. That's the cruelest joke of all. Look at history. Look at the millions who've been enslaved, butchered, silenced. Look at the billions struggling right now just to survive. Tell me, with a straight face, that this is God's plan. Because if it is, it's a plan straight out of a sadist's playbook. And don't let modern technology fool you into thinking we're evolving past this suffering. Sure, we've got smartphones and space exploration, but what do those things mean when 25,000 people die every day from hunger? When families are torn apart by warlords and despots? When the wealthiest 1% hoard resources while the rest of the world fights over scraps? This isn't progress, it's just hell with a shiny new coat of paint. Humanity's fall is not a metaphor. It's not a quaint story about disobedience and forbidden fruit, it's a calculated move in a cosmic game of control. Ancient narratives across cultures paint a picture of humanity being cast down, not by divine wisdom, but by a tyrannical force that sought to imprison us in a material cage. The biblical story of Adam and Eve, for example, has been misinterpreted for centuries. The so-called original sin wasn't about moral failure, it was about humanity being deceived and bound to a corrupt, physical existence. That fall wasn't just symbolic, it marked the beginning of our enslavement to suffering and ignorance. But let's step outside the Bible. In Gnosticism, the fall of humanity is tied directly to the creation of this world by the demiurge. This figure, often described as arrogant and deluded, fashioned the material universe as a trap. The Gnostics didn't just believe this world was flawed, they called it a prison. To them, the demiurge wasn't a creator to be worshipped, but a tyrant to be exposed. And they weren't alone in this belief. In Hinduism, the concept of Maya, an illusion that blinds us to true reality, echoes this sentiment. The material world isn't our home, it's a construct designed to distract and control us. Even outside religious frameworks, the idea of a fall resonates in myths and traditions across the globe. Take the Greek myth of Prometheus. He defied the gods to bring fire to humanity, a gift that symbolized knowledge and power. But what was his reward? Eternal punishment. The message here is clear: reaching beyond your station, seeking something higher, brings suffering. Similarly, in Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki are depicted as deities who manipulated and enslaved humanity. These stories aren't isolated, they're threads in a larger tapestry that tells us one thing: we are prisoners of a system we didn't create but are forced to endure. Let's dig deeper into how this fall manifests in our everyday existence. Human beings are born into dependency. From the moment we take our first breath, we rely on others for survival. This dependency doesn't disappear, it evolves. As we grow, we become slaves to systems that dictate how we live. Education isn't about enlightenment, it's about conformity. Work isn't about fulfillment, it's about survival. Even our relationships are often shaped by societal expectations and pressures. The fall isn't a moment in history, it's a condition of existence that perpetuates itself through every aspect of our lives. And then there's the role of suffering. From ancient texts to modern psychology, suffering is portrayed as a teacher. But let's be honest, what kind of lesson requires endless pain? This isn't education, it's torment. Look at the world's design. Natural disasters wipe out entire communities. Diseases ravage the vulnerable. Violence is not an aberration, it's a constant. The system doesn't just allow suffering, it thrives on it. And the idea that this is all part of some grand, divine plan? That's the ultimate gaslight. Historically, humanity's attempts to rise above this condition have been met with brutal opposition. Revolutions are crushed. Innovators are silenced. Visionaries are labeled heretics or lunatics. Why? Because breaking free from the chains of this fallen state threatens the entire system. The powers that be, whether spiritual, metaphysical, or societal, have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. The fall of humanity isn't just a past event, it's an ongoing reality reinforced every day by those who benefit from our suffering. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's history. From the burning of the Library of Alexandria to the Inquisition, from colonization to corporate greed, every system of control serves the same purpose: to keep humanity ignorant, divided, and subjugated. And every attempt to break free has been met with more chains. Earth is not just a flawed world, it's a highly efficient spiritual prison. This isn't an exaggeration or a metaphor. Many esoteric teachings and ancient philosophies describe our reality as a carefully constructed system designed to trap souls. The mechanisms of this prison are not chains or bars, but systems of control so intricate and pervasive that most people don't even realize they're incarcerated. First, consider the cycle of birth and death, often referred to as samsara in Eastern traditions. This cycle is presented as a natural process, a journey of the soul to achieve enlightenment. But some esoteric schools argue that samsara isn't a journey, it's a trap. Souls are forced to reincarnate, lifetime after lifetime, with their memories erased. Each time, they're thrust into a new body, facing new suffering, but never breaking free from the cycle. This isn't progress, it's entrapment. Imagine being sentenced to life in a prison where every time you try to escape, you're thrown back into a cell with no memory of your previous attempt. That's the spiritual reality for billions of people. Now let's talk about the architects of this prison. In Gnostic traditions, the demiurge is seen as the warden, but it doesn't operate alone. There's a hierarchy of lesser beings, often referred to as archons, who maintain the system. These entities are described as parasitic forces that thrive on the suffering and ignorance of humanity. Their primary goal is to keep you distracted, docile, and disconnected from your true spiritual nature. How do they achieve this? By creating systems of control that infiltrate every aspect of your life. Take organized religion, for example. Throughout history, religion has often been a tool for enlightenment, but just as often, it's been a tool for oppression. Many religious institutions demand obedience rather than encourage questioning. They present doctrines that emphasize guilt, fear, and submission, conditioning you to accept suffering as a divine mandate. Even the promise of heaven often comes with a catch: endure hell on earth, and maybe you'll earn paradise after you die. That's not liberation, it's psychological manipulation on a cosmic scale. But it's not just religion. The prison operates through every system that governs human life: politics, economics, education, and even culture. Governments create laws not to protect, but to control. Economies are built on exploitation, ensuring that a small elite thrives while the majority struggle. Education systems teach conformity rather than critical thinking. Media and entertainment distract you from the harsh realities of existence, feeding you a constant stream of trivialities while suppressing meaningful discourse. These systems don't serve humanity, they serve the prison. And then there's the role of human suffering. In a prison, the inmates are there to serve a purpose. In this spiritual prison, that purpose is energy. Many esoteric traditions suggest that human suffering generates a form of energy, call it emotional, psychic, or spiritual, that is harvested by the forces that run this system. Every war, every famine, every act of violence and despair contributes to this energy. The more you suffer, the more you feed the system. It's not just about keeping you in line, it's about extracting every ounce of vitality from your existence. Look at the structure of your daily life. Most people spend the majority of their lives working jobs they hate just to survive. They are bombarded with propaganda that tells them to consume, conform, and never question the system. This isn't living, it's existing. And the worst part? Most people don't even realize they're part of a system designed to exploit them at every turn. Historically, those who've tried to expose this prison have been silenced. Philosophers, mystics, and revolutionaries who spoke out against the system were labeled heretics, exiled, or executed. Why? Because the prison relies on ignorance to function. Awareness is dangerous. Awareness is the first step toward breaking free. Reincarnation is often sold as a comforting concept, a cosmic do-over where you get another chance to get it right. But let's cut through the feel-good rhetoric and look at what reincarnation really is in the context of this spiritual prison. It's not a second chance. It's not a path to enlightenment. It's a cycle of captivity designed to keep you trapped in suffering and ignorance. In ancient traditions like Hinduism and Buddhism, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, called samsara, is central to understanding existence. But these teachings also make it clear, samsara is not a blessing. It's a problem. It's described as an endless loop of misery, where every birth brings new forms of pain, new struggles, and new attachments that keep you tied to the material world. Enlightenment, in these traditions, is the escape route, the only way out of this repetitive torment. But achieving enlightenment? That's like trying to solve a puzzle while blindfolded and shackled, because the system is stacked against you. The mechanics of reincarnation are rarely questioned. In esoteric teachings, souls are said to be recycled through lifetimes by forces beyond their control. These forces, call them cosmic administrators, spiritual gatekeepers, or the architects of this prison, erase your memory with every new birth. Why? So you can't learn from your past mistakes. Imagine being thrown into a maze, blindfolded, with no memory of the maze you just navigated. That's reincarnation in a nutshell. And the stakes are high. Reincarnation doesn't just reset your life, it resets your suffering. You're not only forced to endure new struggles, you're also made to repeat old ones. Relationships, traumas, fears, they all come back in different forms, lifetime after lifetime. That's why people often experience unexplainable phobias, déjà vu, or instant connections with strangers. These aren't coincidences, they're echoes of the lives you've lived before. But instead of helping you break free, these fragments of memory only add to the confusion. History is filled with teachings about the dangers of this cycle. The Gnostics viewed reincarnation as a deliberate trap set by the demiurge and its minions, designed to keep divine souls tied to the material world. Tibetan Buddhism warns of the bardo, a transitional state between death and rebirth, where souls are lured back into existence by their attachments and fears. Even in ancient Egypt, the concept of the duat, the afterlife, involved navigating a treacherous journey where failure meant being thrown back into the cycle. These aren't tales of liberation, they're cautionary warnings about the machinery of this endless loop. Modern accounts from near-death experiences and past life regressions add another layer to the story. Many people who undergo these experiences describe a light or being that persuades them to return to life, often with promises of fulfilling a purpose or completing unfinished business. But who decides this purpose? Who sets these terms? These narratives suggest that even in death, free will is an illusion. You're guided, or coerced, into returning, not because it's what you want, but because it serves the system. Let's also consider the implications of karma, a concept often tied to reincarnation. Karma is framed as a moral ledger where your actions in one life determine your circumstances in the next. But think about how this plays out. If you're born into poverty, suffering, or oppression, it's because of bad karma from a previous life. This logic not only justifies inequality, but also traps you in a cycle of guilt and self-blame. Instead of empowering you to break free, karma becomes another tool of control, another mechanism to keep you tied to the cycle. Even the promise of spiritual advancement through reincarnation is a mirage. You're told that each life brings you closer to liberation, but there's no guarantee. Most people live and die without ever questioning the system, let alone breaking free from it. And those who do try to escape are often met with obstacles so insurmountable that their efforts seem futile. The system isn't designed for liberation, it's designed for perpetuation. This world isn't just broken, it's designed to make you suffer, and the most sinister part is that it operates as a shared delusion. The idea of a collective nightmare isn't new. Philosophers, mystics, and even modern thinkers have pointed to the possibility that reality as we know it isn't real in the way we think. It's a construct, a shared hallucination designed to trap us. In the Gnostic worldview, the material universe is an illusion created by the demiurge to keep divine souls imprisoned. The illusion is so complete that most people don't even realize they're in it. They live their lives chasing material goals, satisfying superficial desires, and conforming to societal expectations, never questioning the deeper nature of their reality. This illusion isn't a benign mistake, it's a meticulously crafted mechanism. Its purpose? To keep you enslaved to a system that feeds off your energy, your labor, and your pain. First, there's the psychological aspect. From birth, you're conditioned to accept the world as it is. Schools teach you to obey authority, follow rules, and fit into predetermined roles. Religion often reinforces this by telling you that suffering is virtuous, that your rewards come after death, and that questioning the system is tantamount to heresy. The media bombards you with distractions, trivializing real issues and keeping you focused on entertainment, consumerism, and fear. These aren't random elements, they're deliberate tools to keep you asleep, unaware of the deeper truth. Then there's the emotional manipulation. Fear, guilt, and shame are some of the most powerful emotions, and the system knows how to exploit them. Governments use fear to control populations, fear of war, fear of poverty, fear of the other. Religions use guilt and shame to make you compliant, convincing you that you're inherently flawed and need salvation. Even social systems play into this, using peer pressure to enforce conformity. Every part of your life is designed to keep you emotionally entangled in the nightmare, preventing you from waking up and seeing it for what it really is. The nightmare isn't just individual, it's collective. Every war, every economic crisis, every social conflict feeds into it. The system creates artificial divisions, nations, races, religions, ideologies to keep humanity fighting among itself. While people are busy hating each other, they're not questioning the system that keeps them all enslaved. This division isn't accidental, it's engineered. Divide and conquer isn't just a military strategy, it's the foundation of the prison. Even the natural world plays a role in this collective nightmare. Disasters like earthquakes, hurricanes, and pandemics remind us of our fragility, reinforcing the sense of fear and helplessness. But these events also serve a deeper purpose. They keep humanity focused on survival, too preoccupied with immediate threats to look beyond them. The system ensures that you're always putting out fires, never questioning why the fires keep starting in the first place. One of the most insidious aspects of this collective nightmare is how it perpetuates itself. People who've bought into the illusion become its enforcers. Parents teach their children to follow the same rules they were taught. Teachers prepare students to fit into the same broken systems. Leaders promise change but maintain the status quo. The nightmare doesn't just persist, it spreads, generation after generation, because the people trapped in it become its architects. Let's talk about the concept of escape, or the lack thereof. Throughout history, there have been individuals who tried to expose the nightmare. Philosophers like Socrates, mystics like Rumi, revolutionaries like Spartacus, they all pointed to the deeper truth that something is fundamentally wrong with the world. And how were they treated? Socrates was executed, Rumi was marginalized, Spartacus was crucified. The system doesn't just suppress dissent, it punishes those who dare to wake others up. Time is often romanticized as a healer, a teacher, or even an ally. But let's strip away the sentimentality and face reality. Time is not your friend. It's the most efficient tool of control in this entire system. Time doesn't just measure your life, it governs it. It dictates every decision, every regret, and every loss. It's the prison guard you can't see but always feel. To understand the true role of time, let's go back to its origins as a concept. Early civilizations like the Sumerians and Egyptians were among the first to formalize timekeeping. They divided days into hours, months into lunar cycles, and years into seasonal rotations. At first glance, it seems innocent, humans organizing their lives around the rhythms of nature. But it didn't take long for rulers and priests to weaponize time as a tool of control. Calendars dictated when people worked, when they prayed, and even when they rested. Time became a way to structure society, and with that structure came power. Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution. Time was no longer just a tool for organizing life, it became a commodity. Clocks in factories measured productivity down to the second. Workers' lives were divided into shifts, each minute accounted for, each hour monetized. Time stopped being a natural flow and became something that could be bought, sold, and stolen. The phrase "time is money" wasn't just a metaphor, it was a reality that enslaved millions. And let's not forget the psychological impact of time. It's not just an external force, it's something deeply ingrained in your mind. From a young age, you're taught to think in terms of deadlines, schedules, and milestones. You're told that your worth is tied to how you use your time. Are you productive enough? Are you efficient? Every ticking second becomes a reminder of what you haven't accomplished, what you've lost, and how little of it you have left. Time doesn't just control your actions, it controls your emotions. The fear of running out of time creates anxiety. The regret of wasted time fuels guilt. The hope for more time keeps you striving, even when the system you're striving within is broken. These aren't accidental side effects, they're intentional. The emotional weight of time keeps you tethered to the system, always chasing, always fearing, always regretting. Let's look at how time amplifies suffering. The death of a loved one isn't just painful because of the loss itself, it's painful because time ensures that the loss is permanent. Aging isn't just a biological process, it's a constant reminder that time is taking everything away from you, your strength, your health, your opportunities. Even moments of joy are tainted by time, because you know they're fleeting. Time turns every peak into a countdown to a valley. And here's the kicker, time isn't even real in the way we think it is. Modern physics tells us that time is a dimension, not a linear progression. It's relative, malleable, and far less concrete than we experience it. But the system doesn't want you to know that. It needs you to believe in the ticking clock, the calendar, the linear march from birth to death. Because as long as you believe in the inevitability of time, you're easier to control. Time also creates the illusion of progress. Societies point to technological advancements, social changes, and historical milestones as proof that humanity is moving forward. But forward to where? Time becomes a justification for complacency. Things will get better, they say. Give it time. Meanwhile, the same cycles of suffering and exploitation repeat, generation after generation. Time isn't leading us anywhere, it's keeping us in place. Look at the systems that dominate our lives: capitalism, education, governance. All of them rely on time as a framework. You work your entire life, trading hours for dollars, hoping to retire before time runs out. You spend years in school, waiting for a future where you can finally live. But that future never comes, because time isn't leading you to freedom, it's leading you to the grave. Suffering is not just a side effect of existence, it's a resource, deliberately harvested, perpetuated, and consumed. This isn't a philosophical abstraction. It's the core mechanism of the system we're trapped in. Pain, fear, and despair aren't just byproducts of life, they are the currency of this prison. And like any resource, they serve a purpose. Let's get into how and why suffering is extracted and who, or what, benefits from it. Across cultures and traditions, there are recurring ideas that human suffering generates a type of energy. In esoteric circles, it's often referred to as loosh, a spiritual byproduct created by intense emotional experiences. Think about it: war, famine, disease, oppression. These aren't random or isolated events. They're patterns. And patterns don't happen without intent. The constant global suffering isn't just coincidental, it's systemic. Every aspect of life is designed to extract suffering. Governments wage wars that devastate nations. Corporations exploit workers to generate profits. Social hierarchies ensure that billions struggle while a tiny elite hoards resources. But it's not just physical suffering, it's emotional and psychological as well. Media outlets flood us with fear and anger. Social media amplifies envy, insecurity, and loneliness. These aren't side effects of modern society, they're features. Each one adds to the pool of collective suffering, which the system depends on. And here's where it gets even darker: this energy doesn't just disappear. Some traditions suggest that this suffering is consumed, metaphorically or even literally, by entities that exist beyond our perception. In Gnostic texts, the archons are said to feed off the anguish of humanity, sustaining themselves through the energy generated by our pain. Similarly, some occult theories describe parasitic forces that attach to individuals or communities, drawing power from their emotional turmoil. Whether you interpret this literally or symbolically, the result is the same: suffering is not wasted, it's utilized. Think about the industries that profit from suffering. The pharmaceutical industry thrives on illness, offering treatments, but rarely cures. The military-industrial complex grows fat on conflict, with no incentive to end the wars that sustain it. Even charities often perpetuate the problems they claim to solve, creating cycles of dependency rather than solutions. These aren't accidents, they're strategies. Every act of suffering fuels a system that profits from human misery. Historically, this isn't new. Ancient civilizations engaged in mass sacrifices to appease their gods, spilling blood in exchange for favor or fertility. But what if those sacrifices were less about appeasement and more about feeding something? Today, we don't build altars or temples, but the sacrifices continue, only now they're dressed up as necessary evils. Poverty, injustice, and violence are framed as inevitable, just part of how the world works. But inevitable for whom? Not for the ones benefiting from it. Even on a personal level, suffering is extracted. Toxic relationships, workplace exploitation, and systemic discrimination don't just harm individuals, they create ripples of pain that extend outward, affecting entire communities. And these ripples are the real commodity. The system doesn't just want you to suffer, it wants your suffering to be contagious. That's why the news focuses on disasters and tragedies, why social media algorithms amplify outrage, and why economic systems reward inequality. Misery loves company, and this system ensures there's plenty to go around. Let's talk about energy. Science tells us that energy can't be created or destroyed, it only changes form. Now apply that to suffering. Emotional pain, grief, and despair are forms of energy. When you cry, scream, or break under the weight of life's hardships, that energy doesn't just vanish. It goes somewhere. And if the system is designed to maximize suffering, you can bet there's a reason for it. This isn't just speculation. Look at the scale of suffering on this planet. Billions of people live in poverty. Millions are displaced by war. Entire ecosystems are destroyed for profit. This isn't chaos, it's coordinated. The suffering of the many fuels the comfort of the few, creating a pyramid where the pain of the base sustains the luxury of the top. And at the very top, the unseen forces or systems that thrive on the extraction of suffering. Throughout human history, myths have served as more than just stories. They were warnings, coded messages passed down through generations to help us understand the true nature of reality. And when you start digging into these myths, a pattern emerges, a recurring theme of endless struggle, punishment, and entrapment. These aren't tales of hope, they're accounts of a system designed to keep humanity enslaved. Let's start with one of the most famous myths in Greek history, Sisyphus. He was condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only to have it roll back down every time he neared the top. It's often interpreted as a metaphor for futility, but look deeper. Sisyphus isn't just enduring physical labor, he's trapped in a system where every effort is designed to lead to failure. Sound familiar? It's the same dynamic that plays out in our lives. Struggle all you want, against debt, against inequality, against systems of oppression, and the boulder keeps rolling back down. Then there's the story of Prometheus, the titan who gave fire to humanity. His reward? Eternal torture. Every day, his liver is eaten by an eagle, only to regenerate overnight so the process can repeat. Why was Prometheus punished so harshly? Because he tried to break the system. He gave humanity a gift that challenged the gods' monopoly on power. His story isn't just about rebellion, it's about the cost of defiance in a system that thrives on control. Even ancient Egyptian mythology hints at this. The concept of the duat, the Egyptian underworld, wasn't a peaceful afterlife. It was a treacherous landscape filled with obstacles and dangers that souls had to navigate to reach eternal rest. Fail, and you'd be devoured by a fearsome deity. Success wasn't guaranteed, and the journey was fraught with peril. These aren't stories about liberation, they're stories about a system that makes escape nearly impossible. But this isn't just ancient history. The same themes of entrapment and struggle are embedded in modern narratives, whether we realize it or not. Take the American dream, for example. It's marketed as a promise, work hard, and you can achieve anything. But for most people, it's a myth that keeps them grinding endlessly for a goal they'll never reach. It's the same pattern as Sisyphus, just dressed up in capitalism and consumerism. The boulder is now a mortgage, a student loan, or a dead-end job. Let's not overlook the role of entertainment. Modern myths, movies, TV shows, even video games, often replicate these ancient patterns. How many stories revolve around characters trapped in cycles of suffering, endlessly fighting enemies they can't defeat? From dystopian sci-fi to superhero blockbusters, the underlying message is the same: the system is unbeatable, and the struggle is eternal. These narratives don't inspire rebellion, they normalize submission. The question is, why are these patterns so persistent? Why do they show up across cultures, across time, in every corner of the globe? It's because they're not just stories. They're reflections of the system itself. Ancient myths weren't fiction, they were survival guides, coded warnings to future generations about the prison they were born into. Modern myths, by contrast, often serve to reinforce the system, keeping people docile and distracted. Even religions, which are supposed to guide us toward higher truths, often fall into the same trap. Many religious teachings emphasize submission, obedience, and the idea that suffering is redemptive. They promise rewards in an afterlife, but only if you endure the hardships of this life without question. This isn't spiritual enlightenment, it's spiritual control. So where does that leave us? The myths, ancient and modern, paint a clear picture: the system is designed to keep us in place. Every struggle, every hardship, every cycle of suffering is part of a larger design. And while these stories may seem bleak, they hold a key: awareness. The more we understand these patterns, the better equipped we are to question them. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey. I know this topic isn't easy to digest, but the fact that you're still here means you're ready to question the narrative. And that's where change starts, with awareness. So thank you for watching, for thinking critically, and for daring to explore these uncomfortable truths.